big table of contents. You have in front of you a package that's about 18 pages long. That is the reflection of all of this, and it's also the backup at the studentfarmers.org. I'm one of the instructors for Student Farmers. It's a nonprofit. So if you happen to lose the sheets for any reason, or you want another copy, you can get it right online. Let's go to the next slide. I will just introduce myself quickly. President of the Agrarian Group. We are in the business of creating access to the systems and the products that are available through the supply and the demand side of the entire agriculture supply chain, with a focus on local, local, local. If we can produce food, as we're going to talk about tonight, closer to where people eat, then that's a huge benefit. We're not moving it. As you may know, 90% of vegetables come from California now, in the whole United States. So the $1.50 or the $2 head of lettuce is like 75 cents diesel fuel. It's really a crazy shift in the last 50 years. UPenn Masters of Architecture back in the day, that's coming up on now 30 years. Instructor I mentioned for Student Farmers, board member for 3 elected terms of the Sustainable Business Network, and I still write for Green and Safe, which I founded, now coming up on 15 years ago. You've got a copy of the book, which I signed in advance. No pressure to read it because it's full of pictures about sustainability from around the world, so hope you enjoy it. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, here are some advantages. Microgreens have been used as a garnish. So what this basically says at the top is that they grow in 10 days, right? It's a baby plant. It's not a type of a plant. There's microgreen that's kale, and there's broccoli, and all kinds of plants. It is the first 10 days of their life. Well, they have 40 times the nutrients of their mature counterparts, packed with antioxidants and other nutrients. They look like little shoots. So this is, in effect, the 7th day of growth. They're going to be harvested tomorrow and delivered to the Juice Pod and the Griffin Cafe and other restaurants in the area. Plus I eat them personally. Well, it's interesting, to date they've been used basically as a garnish to add flavor. So whether it's a steak shop or it's a little upscale restaurant, they're not used for protein, they're not used for the medicinal values, they're just decoration and a tiny little bit of a flavor boost. What we're seeing, this started in some of the western states like in California and Oregon, chefs starting to really include them into more meals, into smoothies, into other like high nutritious food products. Avocado toast, whatever it happens to be, is fine and good, but like to really start thinking about how to put them into stews and soups and put them on salads and wraps, it's been an education arc that we've undertaken in the last couple of years. Well, here's some all-star greens. If you want the healthy skin, beet and kale microgreens. So all the science has been done, and we have online deep dive, like dozens of pages of depth of all the source links and everything about why this is an accurate statement. Sometimes we rely too much on medicine to try and solve some things that for hundreds of years, if not thousands, were being solved by plants. We eat better, we don't need statins for cholesterol, right? The diabetes and all the things that we're starting to see are sometimes a function of processed foods that aren't produced locally, or are lost in so much of their nutrients from transit. So it's not that there's anything wrong with the kale that comes on the truck from California. It's just been on a truck for a week, and the day you kill it is the day it starts losing those nutrients. Weight loss with a Swiss chard. Sports performance with arugula in terms of iron and how you can rebuild muscles. The heart health with broccoli and radish. Cancer prevention now, they're doing unbelievable research with cancer, the hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent, when some of it goes back to what we put in our bodies, not the chemicals and the radiation that we put basically after the fact. With digestion, and broccoli is also a good one. The immune system, this came up with COVID-19, right? We're all panicked on trillions of dollars into these like global initiatives for vaccination. Fine, fully vaccinated, boosters, I'm not a vaccine denier, but I've also been on a plant-based diet about 80-20 for the last 6 years and did not feel the symptoms when I ended up getting it, even after the vaccine. But they've done the studies now that there's a higher resistance to pandemic, flus, and all kinds of pathogens when your immune system is stronger, and a lot of vegetable-based diet versus processed foods and meats boost the immune system. So, not a bad thing to have in the back pocket. Ulcer relief, not something that I face, but alfalfa apparently does a good job. Cholesterol improvement, I got lucky with some DNA to have a relatively low cholesterol base to start. I know sometimes it's a combination of food, as well as genetics. But again, instead of pharmaceutical companies, not that this solves it, it's a way to start building patterns for not only this generation, all of us here, but the younger group, the next, the Native Americans talk about 7 generations. Think about the impact, not for your life and your children's life and their children, but the whole ripple effect through the arc. So the other one, with vision loss, prevention is really interesting with macular degenerative diseases and all kinds of things that are happening. Again, not solving it, but beginning to take, in what I call the spokes of the wheel, a little bit of strength in how we can prepare ourselves for all the complexity of a modern world. And then with the diabetes, the buckwheat does some amazing things that from a diet standpoint is healthier than so many other types of foods. This is the kind of wow factor. Now maybe we should figure out how to either grow them, buy them, include them in our foods, and act on this information, because even if 1 or 2 of these things is relevant for any one of us, that's probably enough to at least start to think about something like a microgreen. Let's go on to the next slide. Here's basically what happens. You start with a germination process. So in this 10 days, you have a little seed that goes on a tray, and we're all going to talk through how to do this together. But the tray has to have something that will hold the seeds, and that in this case is a hemp mat. Well, the seeds then receive a little bit of moisture from a spray, and they are covered for the 3 days in darkness. And they sprout up. What you are going to see for yourselves is this is day 3. So they start to look like these little babies. Overnight, these will grow another ½ inch to maybe 1/4 of a ½ inch. The more that you water from the underside, because it is possible to just pour water in, you put more potential root hairs up top. So the spraying is just a way to keep everything sort of intact. Visually, maybe more important, but it does look a little disconcerting when it starts to be sort of white and fuzzy, as opposed to just the little stalks. So the upper tray without the holes is the cover during germination. The grow tray has the holes to let it drain, and the lower tray is keeping your counter from getting wet. These are those root hairs that we talked about. Spraying them just keeps them down. The vegetation is then typically the 7 days. And that's when, on day 4, you're lifting the lid and it goes on the windowsill. And within that very next day, they turn green. It's really pretty much a cool miracle, right? The color of the photosynthesis becomes immediately apparent. And I don't know if any of you have young or grade school age children or even grandchildren, but it's kind of proof that something cool is happening on planet Earth that no science can really replicate. This is some magic. We're talking about a hydrogen explosion 90 million miles away called the sun that does this on your own windowsill. The stickers that we're going to give you that have for labeling when we ship, or literally sometimes drive over the microgreens, This is a turnip, radish, the collard, the broccoli, and the purple kohlrabi. Have a high antioxidant in the mix, which is great for smoothies. It happens to be a superfood mix that also has the combination of really interesting flavors. The combination can be anything, meaning you can custom make mixes if you so choose. The seeds we're giving you are that superfood combination. Let's go on to the next slide. Here are the supplies needed. So it's a big list, but it's a simple process because basically you just water them in each morning and check them on the end of the day. But having seeds, pretty good start when you're talking about plants. The grow mat you have in front of you. The spray bottle you have in front of you. Scissors, we've already cut the mat. So that is cut to fit. It comes in a roll that's like 120 feet long. So you're gonna have enough with 3 mats to grow 3 weeks of your microgreens. So the measuring device first, 28 grams is an ounce. So 10 teaspoons makes an ounce. That covers one of the larger 10 by 20 inch trays. So you would have 5 little teaspoons sewed across your mat. That will give you the entire clean, kind of lush carpet effect. You don't want spottiness in terms of clumps. We're gonna do the exercise together when we're done here to actually leave you with a sewed tray ready to take home. Drainage tray with the holes on top, and then without the holes, and then the cover. So that's the sandwich that we're making, if you remember that very first slide. And then the container for the refrigeration, that's the eco-plastic. That 10 by 10 tray is designed with 5 by 5 quads to make 4 containers that are also stackable with the male and female side there. They last a week in the fridge and they're still alive. Now they're not thriving like they would in the sun and continuing to grow, because if they continue to grow, you get the kale plants, you get the radish.
May I ask a
Go
question?
jump in with questions all along,
Okay.
sure.
So are these reusable?
So what we've done is wash these out, absolutely. There is a point when it will biodegrade in a matter of like months in the sun and rain. You know what I'm saying? If you really wanted to watch it biodegrade, you'd have to work at it. It's not gonna fall apart like paper products that are biodegradable. The bioplastic is a PLA. We thought from a sustainability standpoint, since the hemp is biodegradable, the mat, and you can eat the food, the whole thing is sort of eco-friendly.
And can the mats be reused?
It would be such a burden on you to have to pull out and like basically clear the root systems.
So they go in the compost pile?
Those go in the compost.
Okay.
Stickers, I held one of these up. That is more in commerce for letting someone know what they are going to be eating than it is for you guys. But it's fun, I have found, as gifts. You know, it's one thing to show up at a dinner party with a bottle of wine. It's another thing to bring some food you made. Like, you know, I got turned on to this with cucumbers and tomatoes back in the day where we could not eat all of the produce. But showing up with the microgreen pack and getting to tell a story about the nutrients and what it might do for brain health and, you know, heart health is pretty special. That's the stickers. The bonus ingredient is, of course, the tenacity. Do we have any tenacious students here? You showed up, so you got at least that in you, and I'll tell you, I have seen people get frustrated because going away one day and not watering and leaving them on a windowsill is the saddest thing. I mean, they are down. They require care because they're infants, right? This is a NICU that we're working here. So the tenacity is don't give up, or at least call a friend. I've been down at the shore and had to call people in my condo building to be like, do you mind just going down? I'd left a key to like water the microgreens, because I wasn't gonna be back within like 6 hours, and I was worried. The difference between noon and even 6 or 7 p.m. was like enough of a concern for me. So this idea of stewardship and taking care of them is not each hour, it's a morning check-in and end of the day on just the level of water in the tray.
Can you use the self-watering tray with the self-watering fabric?
100% yes, and we're gonna get into that because I actually designed one that's under construction, which has like the drip irrigation where I timed on the liter. It's basically, for a bigger tray, it's about a liter, you know, is gonna be in the range of 32 ounces. So a typical, like a solo cup, for those of you that were in college, the red solo cup is about 16 ounces. Well, that would be just poured in the morning and then check at the end of the day, and about the same. So your 10 by 10 would be more like 8 ounces in the morning, 8 at the end of the day. But if it's a drip irrigation, no problem at all. Daily watering, we talked about it, just the cup that holds 16 ounces or a half liter for the bigger trays. Let's go on to the next slide. We're not going to read every word here because the steps we've been talking about. Sowing is scattering the seeds. You have this in front of you. The germination is letting them, you know, sit under the 3 days, and spraying them, you know, in the morning, and then spraying the underside of the cover. On the next slide, we have the vegetation. Let them run. This is on day 4. You know, you're putting them out in the light, and it doesn't have to be directly on the windowsill. It can be on a table near a window, but the more close to southern exposure that you guys get, the better. And then the harvest is either one of 3 things: pulling them out as I had done, cutting them with the scissors and just putting them on the salads right there fresh, or cutting the tray, in effect, of the hemp mat and putting in the refrigerator. So nothing goes wrong if you let them out for more than the 10 days. They just keep growing. And at some point, you can see one starts to look a little bit like a kale leaf. The 2 leaves are the signature of the microgreen.
Does room temperature make a difference?
So the room temperature is recommended. Cooler for germination, you know, the better, right? So you don't want a hot. You don't leave them on the hot southern windowsill germinating. They're really in the shade. Let's go to the next slide. And this is the superfood mix. We're gonna soak the grow mat and just push the little bit of the edges towards the corners. Let me tell you what happens if you have too much water in the lower tray.
Oh, I know.
It's a little stinky. It's all funky.
Good.
Because what happens is between the hemp and the roots,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
it's making a little biology. Not that a primeval slug is gonna crawl out of there, but it smells like something from a science lab that went a little awry. So if you have your seed bag, this has enough for 4 different trays. So this is not just for tonight. This is like, you have a minimum of 3 weeks. You might get a 4th one out of it, depending on how, you know, let's just say how aggressively you scoop, right? Because filling a teaspoon, we're gonna do 5 teaspoons worth. Well, you could shave it off and have it like sort of really level, or a little more, and that'll make the difference. But we wanted to give you extra seeds, because there's never a downside to overseeding. One of these bags that's in the $20 range is 16 ounces, which is a little more than $1 per super tray, or in your case, 50 cents of seeds. And if at Mom's Organic Market, they're selling $4 containers of microgreens, and you have 4, you know, it's like 50 cents of seeds to make like 12 to 16 or even $14, $15 of food, depending on which type of microgreen. But that's pretty incredible. The hemp cost is like 50 cents. So let's get in and scoop out your first teaspoon's worth. And now here's the test. You're gonna spread it around. You're gonna shake it right, start at one of the corners. The good news is, if you don't like how you've done it with your finger, you just sort of move it around at the end. For microgreen germination, it's very simple. Lower tray has no holes. Middle tray, which has the mat, has the holes to drain, and this is wet. So it's not soaking wet, like dripping, because you don't want too much water to catch in here and just get stagnant. This gets set in the tray that has the holes, set inside the one that has no holes. Another one with no holes, just sprayed wet, and that goes upside down after the seeds have been sowed. I use a 1/4 cup dispenser from the seed mix and just sprinkle these around. It goes very quickly. And the idea here is to get them relatively even, but the reason you don't want the mat to be totally soaking wet, like boggy wet, is that you're going to take your finger and sort of smooth out some of the areas where there's maybe too many seeds to get it evenly distributed. So here we go. That's basically clearing out the 1/4 cup, which holds, by the way, 1 ounce for a 10 by 20 inch tray. I'm going to show you them from the spraying standpoint. I use a sprayer like one of these guys. Just has a head, you can spray with anything. And then I get these nice and moist. So after they've been basically evened out, I'm getting them wet. And what that does is that makes it easier for you when they're dry to spread them around. Otherwise, you get, they glob up on your fingers and become kind of like clustered. And you're going to spray every morning or evening, whenever it's convenient for you. So basically twice a day for about 3 days, and then put the cover back on each time and put them in a cool, dark place to germinate. Sometimes if I see after spraying there are a couple really dense spots, I might just try and spread them around a little bit, but you can see they get on your finger. So it's certainly much easier to do it when they're dry. But it doesn't have to be totally accurate. What you're trying to do is just avoid sort of blank spots in the mix. Then we're going to keep this wet. Remember, we're going to spray the underside of this. It helps to spray the underside of the germination tray each time you spray the seeds themselves. So it's basically going to be the first spray, which is today. I happen to do it on Sundays, and then let it sit. Tomorrow, Monday morning, since it's now Sunday morning, I'll spray it again, both the seeds and the upper side. Do that on Tuesday, and then check for Wednesday. Wednesday, sometimes I do final day of germination, and then I lift the cover on the 3rd day and set them out on the windowsill or on a table near the window and let them grow for about a week.
Are these so bad?
So if they're moist and in the heat, they're going to grow. So the reason they have in like Sweden, I think, those like seed banks, is they're like built into those mountains, right? They're crazy cold and dry. Good way to keep seeds preserved. But the short answer is they will not go bad.
Okay.
So now, you have a spray bottle. It's just water, tap water. So these get the misting, just 1 shot over. You don't need to really get them too wet because it's just basically the tops. So now, you're creating like a little ecosystem in there, a little moisture zone. So this class includes lower tray, drainage tray, hemp, seeds, sprayer, and caps. It's Tuesday evening, and I'm here having pulled from the windowsill in this room the microgreens that have been growing on the sill since Tuesday a week ago. Well, here is the tray that was germinating starting on Sunday. So this is what the greens look like just after about 2.5 days. And they typically get a spray every day. Now, depending on how either dry or humid it is, I could see spraying them potentially twice, in a day, evening and morning as well. Next is this 1/2 liter container. So each morning, and sometimes also in the evening, depending on whether they dry out, I lift this up and I look to see how dry it is. And if I don't see water down there, then I add typically this 1/2 liter. So the most they would get typically in a day, just sort of pouring it in, would be, pouring it in again from the underside, would be typically a 1/2 liter in the morning and a 1/2 liter at the end of the day. And that way you're not disrupting the microgreens up top, you're just letting the roots absorb that. The final phase is going to be tomorrow, which is going to be the harvest. So that will be Wednesday, coming again from the Sunday germination, removing this on Wednesday, and then a full week in the sunlight. And what I'll do is I'll typically just lift up this hemp and go to the center point and cut down the middle and then cut it sideways. So I cut it in half twice, and that will fit exactly at 5 inches inside of a 6-inch little container, and that is great. But off we go, and that is the process for getting the microgreens from germination into the container. For the microgreens, I've had whole systems on big rack systems that are 6 feet or taller with dozens of trays going concurrently, and with lighting systems that are hung with specialty timers, so that I don't have to worry about switching them on or off. The sun is basically doing an approximate split, 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. So when we have a extreme summer day, when you're getting more light, right? We have with the equinox, like what is it, a September 21st, I think is basically the same length of night as day. In the summer, sun might come up at 6:30 or 7, go down at 8:30. So you might have 3 or 4 extra hours. The plants don't really care about that. They want basically an even amount of light to rest. They need to be in the darkness, and they're growing like we do when we sleep. You cannot leave lights on plants all day, every day, and expect them to thrive. They need some form of rest. So with these having a timer, and you just set the dial, like it would come on at 8 p.m., and I would sometimes run it at night because the off-peak electricity was just a fractionally less expensive. It's not like you're using up big money. I mean, it's pennies a day to run these lights because they're LED lights. I brought one in as an example because this one, without trying to blind you here, has the strips. These are set at the 5,000 Kelvin, and what you end up with is an ability to just leave them on a kitchen counter and not have to worry about placing them in windowsills or near sunlight all winter long on a timer. Finishing our day here, so I don't know what you thought within the 90 minutes of this session you were going to get, but I hope we met
Oh my gosh.
or exceeded some expectations. Thank you.